I only took the night shift at the convenience store because it fit around my college classes. The place was tiny. 3 aisles of snacks, a humming drink cooler, a fading lottery poster, and a single bathroom in the back that always smelled faintly of bleach and something older. Most nights dragged by in slow motion, stock a few shelves, wipe the counter, pretend to study, listen to the clock tick loud enough to feel like a heartbeat. But that night didn't drag. It shifted. It changed everything. It started the same way as always. Around midnight, the bell above the door gave its tired little jingle. I looked up from my textbook. A man walked in, late 30s maybe, scruffy beard, clothes worn thin like he'd slept in them 4 days. He kept his head down, shoulders high, hands buried deep in his pockets. He moved through the aisles like he'd forgotten how to be a normal shopper. Picked up a candy bar, put it back, picked up another, put that one back, not browsing, calculating. "Can I help you find something?" I called out, trying to sound casual. My voice echoed in the empty store, too loud in the stillness. He glanced at me, eyes sharp and narrow. "Just looking," he muttered, his voice like sandpaper. He grabbed a soda, brought it to the counter. When I rang it up, he paid with crumpled bills, never meeting my eyes. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Hey, bathroom. You got one?" "Yeah, in the back. Need the key." I handed him the big plastic tag we used so people wouldn't walk off with it. He nodded once and disappeared through the back hallway. I tried to go back to my reading, but something about him stuck with me. The way he kept glancing at the windows, the way his jaw shifted like he was grinding his teeth, like someone waiting for something or someone to catch up. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No flush, no water, no noise, just the hum of the lights and the buzz of the cooler. I stood there trying to convince myself I wasn't being paranoid. Night shifts make you imagine things. Everyone says so. Still, I walked to the back. "Everything okay in there?" I called through the door. No answer. I knocked harder. "Sir, nothing." The silence pressed in thick and heavy. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the spare key from the office, my hands trembling without me realizing it. When I unlocked the door and pushed it open, I expected to see him collapsed on the floor, maybe overdosed or passed out. But the bathroom was empty, light on, sink dry, toilet untouched, and the key tag sat neatly on the counter. He hadn't walked past me. He hadn't slipped out the front door. I would have heard it. The door had an old metal hinge that screamed when it moved up. My eyes moved to the window above the toilet, too small for a person. Locked. Then a soft thump above me. I froze. The ceiling was one of those cheap drop-tile ones, thin white panels resting on metal rails, the kind anyone could push up with one hand. My heart pounded. I stared up at the tiles, searching for any shift, any sign of movement. Nothing. I backed out slowly, eyes on the ceiling, then returned to the front counter and opened the security monitor. I rewound the footage. There he was, entering the bathroom, the door closing behind him. No one came out. Another thump, louder directly above me. I jumped back so fast a chair toppled over. The panel above the counter, was it sagging slightly? Or was that my imagination? I reached for the phone, thinking about calling my manager. But what would I even say? A man disappeared, and now my ceiling is making noises. I sounded insane, even in my own head. I tried to distract myself by restocking chips, but every rustle reminded me of movement overhead. The store felt too bright, too empty, too exposed. Then the bell above the door jingled again. I spun around, heart in my throat. But this time, it was a police officer. He stepped inside like he was just grabbing coffee on break, but his eyes scanned the store with purpose. "Evening," he said. "You seen a guy come through here? Scruffy beard, about 6 foot, driving a blue sedan." My mouth went dry. "Yeah. He was here, bought a soda, went to the bathroom, and then he disappeared." Disappeared. The cop frowned. "His car is still outside. Matches a bolo from earlier tonight. He assaulted 2 people down the road. Clerk and the customer badly." The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too loud. He asked for the restroom key. I checked after he took too long, but he was just gone. The cop's expression hardened. "Show me." I brought him to the bathroom. He scanned the tiny space, then looked up. These panels lift. I heard noises up there. My voice was barely a whisper. He stepped onto the toilet and pushed a tile up with his flashlight. Police, if you're up there, show yourself. At first, there was only silence, then scrambling fast, heavy. The officer drew his gun, shouting again. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over myself as I retreated to the hallway. Then chaos erupted. Thuds, grunts, dust falling like snow. The man was up there, hiding, crawling around above me the entire time. Backup arrived just as a ceiling tile crashed down, and the man fell through, hitting the floor in a twisted heap before scrambling to his feet. His eyes locked onto me, wild, frantic. He lunged. I screamed. The cop slammed into him, tackling him just inches from where I stood. The struggle was brutal. Shouts, curses, the scrape of boots on tile. Stay down. The officer yelled. You're done. When they cuffed him and dragged him out, he twisted his head toward me, eyes full of something cold and furious. You should have left me alone, he hissed as they hauled him into the night. They later found a knife in his pocket, one he hadn't pulled yet, one he had definitely planned to. Turns out his name was Robert Hayes. He'd been on the run for weeks, drifting from town to town, hiding in ceilings of stores to rob them after closing. Sometimes worse. The assaults earlier that night were bad. The news later said the gas station clerk he attacked might not fully recover. Police told me flat out that he planned to wait me out. She was alone, he admitted. Easy target. I quit a few days later without looking back. But the thing that still gets me after everything, when we cleaned up the mess, I saw it. A single dark footprint stamped in the dust above the bathroom, right above where I usually stood to restock. He'd been crawling around up there, watching through vents, maybe even watching me. Now, whenever I'm in a quiet store, I look up because ceilings aren't just ceilings anymore, they're hiding places. And sometimes someone is already up there waiting. The pit of gravel at the small convenience store where I worked the late shift. I was cleaning the counter. The type of work you do when you're young and in need of money for school. It was hardly more than a box with 3 aisles, a humming chiller in the rear, and a flickering sign in the window that buzzed like a jarred bug. Most nights were calm, but occasionally they were too quiet. A truck driver stumbling in for coffee, a couple of inebriated people searching for cigarettes, and the odd adolescent attempting to steal gum. The same routine, the same quiet, the same loneliness. Even though I had only been there for a few months, the hours had started to meld together. Pretend not to hear the odd creaks coming from the back storage room. Sweep the floor, stock the chips, check the milk's expiration dates, unlock up at dawn. Now it was all muscle memory. However, everything changed that night in a way that my body detected before my head did. At midnight, the bell over the entrance chimed. I looked up from the textbook I was using to look busy. Although I was actually pretending to be studying, a man entered. Typical. My initial instinct was that people might be so painfully forgettable that they are ordinary. It's only later that you understand forgettable poses a risk of its own. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, a face that could fit in with any crowd, short hair, and a simple jacket. He moved slowly around the aisles, touching items without paying much attention to them, grabbing a candy bar, putting it back, and looking around the shelves in an odd silence. I watched him the way you do when you're by yourself at night without a co-worker to joke around with or hide behind. He eventually came up to the counter with nothing. He replied softly, "Pardon me," but beyond the tenderness, there was a tightening. Outside, my car broke down. "Can I use your phone?" Outside, we had a payphone, but it hadn't worked in days. I gestured to the person behind the register. "This one is yours to use. Just move quickly." "What became of your vehicle?" He said, "Just won't start." His eyes did not smile. They remained empty, unfocused, and practically scripted. "The battery, most likely." He turned his back on me and called a number. His voice was too low. All I could hear were soft moans. He exhaled a breath that sounded expertly constructed to elicit sympathy as he hung up. No response. My pal must be asleep. Would you be able to come look at the car for a moment? All I need is an additional set of eyeballs. My stomach constricted. Never leave the building during your shift. According to store policy, don't go, pleaded every part of me. Avoid being foolish. Avoid placing yourself in a predicament from which you cannot escape. However, he appeared innocuous, worn out, and ashamed, and the brightly lit parking lot was only a short distance away. I said, I don't know much about cars, in the hopes that he would overlook it. Please, he insisted, controlled, not desperate. Take a minute. I nodded in defiance of all my instincts. All right, give it a minute. I took my keys, shut the drawer, and went after him, outside. The temperature felt lower than it should have. His car was the only vehicle in the parking lot. When the surveillance lights failed to reach the tree iron, a dark vehicle drew up. The second warning ought to have been that. He was the first. He opened the hood. I pretended to know what I was looking at as I leaned over the engine. It sounded like something someone might say. So I said, maybe the battery cables are loose. Then I felt it press against my side, cold and firm. I glanced down and saw a long knife that reflected the faint light like a little moon strip. Everything inside of me froze, and my breath caught. Get in the car, he muttered. There was no longer any softness. He had a steel voice. Keep quiet. What? Why? I'll stop talking, please. He growled. Make a move. He shoved me in the direction of the passenger door. My thoughts raced. Run and scream. He would stab me if I made a sound. He was too certain, too calm, too close. He pushed me in, got behind the wheel. The knife remained millimeters from my ribs. He flipped the key. The vehicle began right away. It had been a lie, the breakdown. We exited the parking lot and entered a dimly lit road that wound through deserted forests. I could feel my heart pounding in my teeth. Where are we going? I muttered. Just let me go, please. I refused to. He looked at me, and I saw something familiar in the sharp angle of his jaw for the first time. He said, You know me, do you not? High school. My mind jumbled. A face. A corridor. A memory that was more of a haze than a memory. Ken, I pushed my way out. Morgan, Ken. He remained silent. Didn't need to. Even though we had only been driving for a short while, it seemed like hours when he turned into a dirt road. Beneath us, a pit appeared. The car's headlights were swallowed like a mouth by an abandoned, silent ancient construction site. The engine was killed by him. Leave. He marched me toward a level area of stone and dirt, the knife digging into my back. The sounds of the night were muffled by panic. I pleaded. I begged. It didn't matter. He exerted pressure. I stumbled. The world then broke apart in fear. I won't go into great detail about it. The attack. The way his breathing changed. The way he kept the blade close at hand. And the way the sky above me seemed so vast and unattainable. When he was done, his chest rose and fell as he stood back. You're not, I said. You're not going to let me go. He cast a downward glance. No. A white-hot explosion was the first stab. Then one more, and still another. Every impact made my body tremble. My thoughts cried out. Nothing was grasped by my hands. I was drowning in my own skin. I allowed my body to go slack when he eventually retreated. I made myself breathe more slowly. I partially closed my eyes. I feigned death. His demeanor was unreadable as he observed me for a short while. After then, he turned, left, got into the car, and drove away. The heavy, oppressive silence that followed was only broken by my own damp, faint breaths. Hot, slick blood seeped through my shirt. I touched the wounds with my trembling hands. I had no idea which ones were lethal. I had no desire to find out. Make a move. A voice within me gave an order. Either move or perish. I turned over onto my side. I nearly passed out from the intense pain. Gravel penetrated my flesh and adhered to the blood. I crawled, pushing through the fire beneath my skin and the fear that he could come back. I pulled myself inch by inch. I noticed it at the pit's edge. A dim light from the porch. A home. Hope was nearly as painful as the wounds. I left a path that was darker than the night as I dragged myself across the grass. My arms shuddered. My eyes throbbed. When I got to the porch, I raised my hand and knocked. "Help," I gave a rasp. "Please." The door opened. A woman let out a scream. Behind her, a man hurried. They dragged me inside, covered me with blankets, and applied towels to my injuries. In the distance, sirens rose and wound their way through the trees like rescuers. The paramedics showed up. Hands, lights, voices, a helicopter, a blurring and unblurring world. Before I was put under anesthesia at the hospital, I heard someone mention many stab wounds. Get ready for emergency surgery. Days later, the cops were waiting for me when I woke up. I told them everything. The name, the pit, the store, and the lie. They quickly located him. He admitted it even more quickly. The trial was a nightmare of its own. However, I turned to face him. I said what had to be said. He was given life. However, the wounds persisted. Years went by. I recovered both psychologically and physically. It moved more slowly. However, I returned to school, graduated with a degree in psychology, and assisted people who had endured unimaginable hardships. I penned a book. I relocated to Florida. I offered to help. I was alive. What he attempted to take from me, that evening turned into something else. A fire, a warning, a reminder that evil isn't necessarily monstrous. It can appear peaceful, courteous, and average at times. It occasionally enters your store at midnight and begs for assistance. Trust the part of you that tells you something is amiss. If you ever find yourself in a situation like that, it could save your life. A situation like the silent times. I had only been working at the little gas station on the outskirts of town for a few months, long enough to commit the layout, the usual patrons, and the same nightly routine to memory. Alone on a peaceful route, it was encircled by dark trees and broad fields that engulfed the road after sunset. We were open 24 hours a day. It's the kind of spot where truck drivers battle exhaustion, night shift workers stop for coffee, or the occasional visitor wandering around town without a tale to tell. The owner didn't ask many questions, and I accepted the position because I needed the money for school. The pay for a night work was slightly higher, and I reasoned that, if it meant maintaining my plans for tuition, I could put up with some dullness and fluorescent illumination. However, that one night permanently altered my perception of darkness. An hour before the shift, my coworker called in sick, leaving me by myself. The manager told me that it happened frequently and dismissed it. He would typically fall asleep on the couch and fail to check in. The store fell into the eerie silence that only lonely places experience after midnight. The lights buzzed overhead, the coolers hummed continuously, and the stark white canopy outside the pump resembled abandoned stage props. Between 1 and 1:30 a.m., not a single vehicle was refueled. To keep my hands occupied, I restocked cigarettes, arranged candy bars so they resembled soldiers, and cleaned the counter. Barely a minute had gone by each time I looked at the clock. It was the kind of night when the quiet seemed oppressive, as if it was anticipating something. The door chime rang at 1:32. A short, sturdy man who appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s entered. His jeans were dusty. His jacket was worn and dark, and his hair was cut short as if he didn't give a damn about fashion. He didn't even hesitate to look at me or say hello. He simply moved toward the rear aisles. Nevertheless, out of habit, I said hello. He remained silent. I glanced to the little security monitor above the register because of the slow, leisurely way he moved. I saw him select a pack of energy drinks, then chips, and then go around once more as if he was inspecting something. Eventually, he walked over to the counter and set down his belongings without a term. Then, like a punctuation mark, he dropped a package of condoms last. I called all the numbers. I said, $12, $40. After giving me the money, he read my name tag with a small twist of his head. Eleanor, he murmured slowly. What a lovely name. Eleanor. How would you phrase it? I gave a nod. Yes. He seemed to swirl the name Eleanor about in his mouth as he lingered on it. I attempted to slide his suitcase a bit closer when he remained motionless. That's when he bent over the counter, You working all by yourself tonight?" My stomach constricted. I had been taught the customary line by the manager, "Never claim to be by yourself." "No," I lied right away. "In the back is my partner." He grinned, but it did not extend to his eyes. "Oh, yeah," he said. When I entered, I saw no one else. He leaned in closer. "Must feel pretty lonely out here in the middle of nowhere." "It's fine," I answered, attempting to sound informal. "Have a good night." He remained motionless. He said, "You got a boyfriend, Elena? Someone to keep you company after shifts like this?" My heartbeat accelerated. "That's personal." I was chilled by the deep, breathing sound of his laughter. "Simply conversing. If you do, you're a lucky guy. Very fortunate." His tone changed, becoming more somber. "Unless you're available to me, instead." My throat constricted. I succeeded. "Take your belongings and leave." His gaze never left my face as he straightened. "You are aware that," he whispered, "since midnight, I have been observing you. Behind that counter, you look really good. Tell me, are you afraid of me?" I was frozen in place by his remarks. "From where are you observing me? How long will it last?" The pumps outside the windows remained empty. It was dark on the roadway. Numerous times I had glanced out there, but I had seen nothing. I forced myself to say, "You need to leave," as my chest tightened. The door chimed once more at that same moment. A bunch of guys, fresh from a party, staggered in, laughing, and smelled like cheap cologne and beer. They immediately made their way to the beer fridge. The spell-breaking man peered over his shoulder. He picked up his luggage, gave me one more look that was sharp yet unreadable, and left without saying anything. I held my breath until the door closed behind him. After a few minutes, the group paid and departed. As soon as they left, I contacted my manager in a trembling voice and shut the door for a safety precaution until another customer arrived. He instructed me to keep the door locked. In the morning, he would send someone. The remainder of the night passed slowly. Outside, every shadow seemed to be him. I jumped at every headlight on the highway. It wasn't until the sky began to turn pale blue that I unlocked the door once more. I hardly spoke about my relief when it came at 6, just enough to let go of the burden in my chest. I didn't want to come across as theatrical. I didn't want to come across as afraid. However, I was afraid, wired and tired. I stopped for coffee at the diner on the way home. Everything inside of me fell apart at that point. A wanted poster from the sheriff's office was affixed to the community bulletin board at the entryway. It had his face on it. The same build, the same look, the same short hair, wanted for interrogation in several attacks on women. 15 miles from the gas station. One is at a rest stop. According to one woman, he observed her for some time before coming over. Another stated that he inquired as to whether she was by herself. As I dialed the number on the poster, my hands trembled. Later that day, the police arrived at my residence. I told them everything. The time on the receipt, his inquiries, his voice, and the way he gazed at my name tag. They made notes. They requested the security footage from the store. They informed me that he preyed on lonely ladies at parking lots, gas stations, and other locations when nobody else was present at night. I gave up after a week. I relocated to a larger town and got a day job in a cafe with windows overlooking the street and lots of customers. But even now, years later, every time I walk by a deserted gas station at night, my gut tightens. I am unable to view empty pumps without pondering what could be concealed in the shadows. And one question comes to me the most every time I reflect on that evening. What if those guys hadn't entered at that precise moment? Because I know in my heart how close things were to going wrong, and how easily I could have become just another face on a wall-mounted poster. Just another face on a wall-mounted poster. Absence of witnesses, Officer Lena. And I had just concluded our conversation when the store fell silent once more. Like she did on several of her graveyard patrols, she swung by around 4 in the morning to check in and grab a coffee. During my shift, she was one of the few familiar faces I truly looked forward to seeing. I said, slow as usual, as she mixed the sugar into the cup. "That's good," she remarked, grinning wearily. "Stay safe, okay?" I gave a nod. The headlights of the patrol car swept across the front windows before disappearing into the night as she drove off. The store then returned to its typical hum, with the air vent occasionally rattling and the refrigerators buzzing, and the old neon sign outside, which flickered as if it was having trouble staying awake. In an attempt to keep myself occupied and avoid falling asleep while standing up, I returned to organizing the candy racks. Later that morning, my thoughts turned to my classes and how the fast shop on First Avenue was meant to be a straightforward employment to help me pay for college, restocking shelves, cleaning, and keeping track of the minutes till sunrise constituted the majority of nights. The door chimed a few minutes later. Keith entered. I knew who he was right away. Mid-50s, wiry, grey stubble, deep wrinkles, and always purchasing beer or cigarettes. The air seemed heavier when he was around. He gave me a nod and strolled around the aisles, taking a magazine and putting it down without opening it, picking up a beverage and putting it down again. There was something unsettling about him. I pretended not to notice as I remained behind the bar and counted the drawers. He finally devised a single pack of gum. I tried to seem courteous but detached as I said, "Evening, that will cost $110. His gaze remained fixed on mine as he gave me correct change. They stayed too long, too intently, too inquisitively. "Are you working alone tonight?" he inquired nonchalantly, yet there was a hint of suspicion in his voice. Something greasy and incorrect. "Yeah," I replied, stated, quiet shift. He watched me while pocketing the coins. "Outside, my bike is locked up. Would you be able to watch it while I go outside?" I overlooked something. I paused. He was a regular, although it wasn't actually permitted to leave the counter, unless absolutely required. He was riding his bike outside. It didn't appear to be a significant issue. I said, "Okay, just for a moment." He gave a weak, almost relieved smile. "Join me at the door so you can see." I followed him to the door after emerging from behind the counter. However, he turned around as soon as we were out of the camera's line of sight. From his jacket, a knife flashed, so fast that I hardly saw it. Cold steel brushed on my ribcage. "Don't shout," he muttered. His breath had an unpleasant odor. "Come along with me. Be normal." My body stiffened. A tiny pang of anguish blossomed beneath my blouse as I felt the blade's edge pierce it. "Please," I muttered. "Take the money. The register is now open. Everything is yours." "Shut up," he yelled, applying more pressure with the blade. "We're taking a stroll. Try anything, and it's finished." Like an old friend accompanying me, he put his arm around my shoulders, got me outside. We may have appeared to be two persons conversing to onlookers, but the knife was always by my side. There was nobody in the parking lot. There were no pedestrians, no headlights, and no witnesses. He guided me through dark lanes, sleeping houses, backyards, and across the street. Each stride felt like moving farther into a nightmare. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. "Where do we intend to go?" Trying to maintain a steady tone, I asked in a low voice. He said, "My place, not far away." "Don't speak." A few blocks away was his apartment complex. He pushed me inside after dragging me up the steps and unlocking the door. I was first struck by the fragrance, sweat, mold, and stale beer. The floor was covered in discarded bottles, boxes, and soiled laundry. After we left, he secured the door with a loud click. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a filthy sofa. I tried to calm my breathing as I sat trembling. I whispered, "I know you. From the shop. I've been courteous to you all along. Just let me go, please." He placed the blade down, on the table, yet reachable, then reclined in his chair and gazed at me as though inspecting something he had already determined was his. "I've been watching you," he answered coolly. "Unlike other girls, you're kind and not conceited. I anticipated having some company this evening." He stood up, took a drink from the refrigerator, and hissed as he opened it. "Do you want one?" My gut churned. "No." His gaze never left me as he drank. Then he spoke bluntly. "Remove your clothing." The knife was not as powerful as the words. My body went cold. "No," I muttered. "Don't do this, please." Tapping the blade on his palm, he picked up the knife once more. Do it or I'll force you to. Before I knew I was weeping, I could feel the tears streaming down my cheeks. I obeyed, my hands trembling wildly. The fear, the humiliation, the knowledge that something irreversible was taking place. I experienced everything at once. He attacked me mercilessly and without hesitation. I attempted to stay inside my body and closed my eyes. I had to be mindful. I had to live. When he was finished, he got up and began to breathe heavily. "Don't move," muttering. He reached for another beer. The knife remained on the table, just out of reach in an instant. I observed his drinking, his shoulders loosening, and his gaze straying. I also observed the kitchen, the block of knives, and a strategy that was developed out of survival instincts rather than daring. He took a seat next to me again and muttered ominous threats to keep me here and prevent anyone from ever finding me. With each bottle, his voice became more slurred as his eyes briefly strayed. I relocated. I ran into the kitchen and picked up the biggest knife I could find. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he roared as he went toward me. I swung when he grabbed my arm. He felt the blade pierce his chest. His eyes widened in horror as he stumbled back. I struck his arm with another stab. Even though he was bleeding profusely, he continued to approach me while cursing. I used all of my strength to shove him. Bottles were knocked over when he crashed against the table. I bolted. The only room with a lock was the bathroom. I threw myself in, closed the door, slammed it, and pushed a cabinet in front of it while using my shoulder as support. A few seconds later, he arrived at the door and pounded so forcefully that the hinges shook. "Open up. This is becoming worse because of you." I curled up in the bathtub, using a can of spray deodorant and a pair of scissors as impromptu weapons. I bit my own lips so hard that I tasted blood, which I subsequently understood was blood. The minutes stretched into what seemed like hours. I was more afraid of his eerie silence than his ranting as he alternated between threats and groans of anguish. I repeatedly muttered to me, "I'll be noticed by someone. There will be a visitor. Let them come, please." The beating eventually stopped. The flat became excessively silent. Then there were crisp, demanding voices outside saying, "Police, open the door." A collision as the front door broke. Yailing. Heavy footsteps. A struggle. "Are you in the restroom, Amanda? The police are involved." With trembling arms, I pulled the cabinet aside and opened the door. In an instant, it opened. The doorway was crowded with officers. The moment they noticed me, the guns lowered. One put a blanket over my shoulders and gently led me out. "You're safe," he declared. "We've got you." Behind him, Keith lay on the living room floor, handcuffed and wounded. I was examined by the paramedics. I was shaking uncontrollably. I told them everything. I found out in the weeks that followed that he had been preparing it. He had a lengthy history of violence, but he was always getting away with it. It was a horrible trial. In front of strangers, I had to relive every detail. However, I gave a testimony. He received a life sentence without the possibility of release. I got counseling, changed employment, and discovered how slowly trust can be restored. I still check locks twice, stay away from night shifts, and keep a watchful eye on shadows. However, I engaged in combat. I made it through. Furthermore, I refused to allow him to steal the remainder of my life. I refused to allow him to steal the remainder of my life.